I'm Kathy Fisher. If you are new to my classes, welcome, welcome. This is my cookbook, Straight Up Food, and my website is called straightupfood.com. If you've never visited that, check it out. All of my food is 100% plants, no added salt, oil, or sugar, and also gluten-free. This is what we're making today, lentil and rice loaf. There's a little picture there of it, and I have one already made, so I'll show you at the end what the completed one looks like. So this is one of the things that I use as a centerpiece dish, and it's just really flavorful. It's got sage and thyme and rosemary in it, so it's very aromatic and it just tastes like holidays. But you can make it anytime you want as well. It's a very hearty, it's like a meatloaf without meat, basically. It's a little more special though, it's with all the herbs and stuff. So I'm going to make the lentil rice loaf first, and then after that we'll make the ketchup, because some people like to put ketchup on top of their meatloaves, their meatless loaves. All right. So step one is to get kind of the meat of the loaf ready, and I've already done that step because it's cooking some lentils and rice with some 1 3/4 cups water, half cup short grain. I'm going to set this down for a sec. Half cup short grain rice. This is what I used, organic brown short grain rice. And also a half cup of green lentils. 1 3/4 cups water. Then 2 teaspoons poultry seasoning. This is the poultry seasoning that I'm using. It doesn't have poultry in it. Don't worry. It's got, let me read and see what it's got. Sage, onion, white pepper, parsley, ginger, and cumin. Different poultry seasonings will have different ingredients. I'm not loyal to one brand or another. I use different ones, and it just smells really good. It smells like the holidays, like herbs. It's just so delicious. So don't skip the poultry seasoning. You can get this anywhere you buy herbs and spices. And then last in that pot with the rice and the lentils is a little bit of granulated onion. I think I just do 1 teaspoon, so I'm running kind of low on that. But granulated onion, if you only had powdered or you only had minced, that's okay too. I just like granulated. That's what I use most often. So that is step one. You put it all in the pot. I like to use a pot that's kind of medium like this because it's not a ton of volume in there. So you bring it to a boil, you cover it, turn it down to a simmer. You simmer it for about 40 minutes. This doesn't have to be completely cooled, but it can be if you want. I just cooked this morning, so it's still a little steamy. Okay. All right, so we're going to come back to this bowl in a little bit. Step two is we're going to saute some vegetables here in my, this is an Ozeri, O-Z-E-R-I frying pan that I use quite frequently in my classes. It is in my online store. If you go to my website, straightupfood.com, you'll see a store up in the menu, and you'll find it in there. I like it. It's a ceramic coated pan, and nothing sticks to it, and I like to have one of these around for pancakes, hash browns, veggie burgers, things that normally take oil on the surface. So since I don't use oil, I put a little bit of water in there, and when the water starts bubbling, I know that it's nice and hot and ready, and we'll put our onion. All right, so see, our water is bubbling there. So now we're going to add our veggies. If we were to just put these in the bowl and without cooking them first, they would not be soft enough. So we want to give them a little saute first. So this is 1 onion. I used a white onion this time. Sometimes I use a yellow onion. It doesn't really matter. You could also use a red onion. Does not matter. So chop it up. It's about 2 cups of onion, 2 ribs of celery. And this is going to go in the food processor too, so you don't have to worry about how it's chopped exactly. And then, what did I say? 5, I think I said 5 cremini mushrooms. If you can't find these brown creminis, you can also use white mushrooms. Okay, if you've never sauteed without oil before, it's really easy. You just put a little water in the bottom of the pan like I did at the start. And this is called sauteing, just means cooking on high heat while stirring. Now if you keep stirring it like this, keep an eye on it. You don't need to add more water. And the idea is that you're going to get more flavor without adding, the less water you use, the more flavor you will get. So I'm going to be adding 1 tablespoon of garlic next. I already got my garlic pretty much ready. This is my little garlic chopper, and I'll show you how to use it in a sec. These cloves are already, they already have the paper taken off, but this one does not. So I'm going to show you how I do that. And this is a garlic sleeve, silicone. So you just put your garlic clove that still has this irritating little paper on it, and you put it inside, and then you just roll it. You kind of push down and roll, and you can kind of hear it kind of give. And then you take it out, and there you go. Now, with all of our garlic cloves in there, we're going to put the lid on. This is a little Tupperware garlic chopper, and then you just pull this. The more you pull, the finer it gets. Take the blade out. This is on my website too. I love this thing. Chopping garlic is my least favorite kitchen task. So I was really happy to get this. I'm going to measure out 1 tablespoon. These are my magnetic measuring spoons. I love them. They stick together. They have 2 ends. They are fabulous. So we'll see how good I did on estimating my garlic cloves here. Pretty good. That's about 1 tablespoon. Step 3 is to preheat the oven to 350, which I already did, and then we are going to line our loaf pan when I'm done. But standard loaf pan. This is a non-stick surface, but I'm going to line it anyway. It's just much easier. It keeps your pan nice and clean. There's a couple different ways you can do this. I think the way I'm going to show you today is a way that I have not shown you recently. And what you want to do is just pull out a piece of the parchment paper, enough to go up the sides and, you know, all 4 sides. So that looks about right. So just mark on the paper where those 4 corners are with a pen or a pencil or whatever. Okay. And leave it there. Then with your scissors, just cut in diagonally to those corners. Okay, so then just take it and you push it down inside. A little bit hanging over the edge is fine, but you don't want so much hanging over the edge. Parchment paper, if you've never used it, it can go into the oven up to like 450 degrees. Nothing sticks to it. It's great. And you can find it near the aluminum foil, saran wrap in the grocery store. Okay. So don't be as wasteful as me when you do this. Okay. We're going to add some tomato paste, 1 can of tomato paste. There it is. Tomato paste just has tomatoes in it and citric acid, which is a natural preservative. Concentrated tomatoes give a lot of flavor. So if you're a person who's giving up salt and you want more flavor, have a lot of tomato paste around. It's just naturally salty tasting. And 3/4 cup rolled oats, just regular old rolled oats. All right, then I'm going to put in about a 1/2 cup of pecans because I just love nuts in these meatless loaves. If you don't want to do nuts, you can leave them out. Or you can do a different kind of nut, a walnut. I don't know what else would be good. I think pecans are very holiday though. So I haven't chopped these yet just because I wanted to show you how big I chop these. And this is my 8-inch chef's knife. But I love when I'm having a bite of this lentil loaf and I just get a nut in there. It's just a nice texture change. We're going to add these to our bowl. This is called the bench scraper or pastry scraper. This is great to have around. Another inexpensive tool like the garlic sleeve that I just love, love, love. Right here. So now we're going to add our fresh herbs. You can use dried herbs for this, but if you're making this for Thanksgiving or Christmas or something nice, use the fresh. So I'm using today some fresh sage, some fresh rosemary, and some fresh thyme. And I've already chopped all these up because this takes a little bit of time. So this is the rosemary, and it is 1.5 teaspoons. Then we have the thyme, 2 teaspoons, finely chopped fresh thyme, and then 1 tablespoon chopped sage. All right, so now we're going to put in our cooked veggies, and we're going to just tie it all together. And we are going to put this in the food processor. You know, I've heard of people saying that they don't have a food processor, so they didn't do that step, and I think that would work just fine. But if you want it to look more like traditional meatloaf, you'll want to do the food processor step. And if you've ever used a food processor, you know that sometimes if it's got a lot of volume in there, it doesn't turn over the best. So that's why I'm doing this pre-stir. This is a 14-cup food processor. It's a Cuisinart. This one is on my website if you're interested. All right. So right in here, I'm using my little S-blade today. We're going to put about half of this into the food processor. Without making a mess. So I'm going to put the lid on. And we're just going to pulse it for about 4 times. And I always take the lid off. I scrape down the sides. And then just give it a few more. You don't want to over-mix it because that kind of dilutes the flavors. Just so you can, so it's still kind of chunky, but it's sticking together kind of like a dough. I'm going to put this right into the pan. I think I'll leave the blade in. We'll see how that goes. Oh, and one thing that's helpful when you're just starting here is take a spoonful and just put it on either end to kind of help hold that parchment paper down. So once you get that in there, just smash it into the corners. This will help your parchment paper stand up too. And press it down. When we're all done, we're gonna end up with the whole thing being fairly well pressed into the pan here. Get those corners. Okay. So we're going to put our blade back in, and if you don't have a food processor and you don't plan on getting one and you want to make this, just chop everything smaller. Chop your onions smaller, your celery smaller, your mushrooms. And then for like the oats, you could even use like a quick cooking smaller oat. People who normally eat meat on a regular basis, they've eaten this and they love it. So what I like to do is don't even tell them it doesn't have meat in it. Sometimes that's the only way we can get people to realize that health-promoting food can actually taste good, by kind of tricking them. Just give it to them, and then afterwards they'll say, "Oh, that was so good," and then you can talk about it. But sometimes if you talk about it first, they won't try it. All right, so again, just press it into the corners. Make sure your parchment paper is upright and against the sides. Remember how I said earlier that you can trim this off once the food was in there? You can go ahead and do that now if you don't want that sticking up. I do like a little bit sticking up because when it's done, you can just lift it right out after it's cooled for a few minutes. So now we're going to cover this. Otherwise, it'll get it'll just get too dried out. And let me move. So my recipe says cover with aluminum foil. If you don't want to put straight aluminum foil over that, you can put a piece of parchment paper first. So I want to cover this area here. And it can kind of bubble up like that a little bit if you want. Okay, now you can get your piece of aluminum foil, and we will remove this the last 20 minutes of baking. Okay. So we're going to bake this at 350 for, let me remind myself, 40 minutes. Okay. Some people like to put ketchup on their loaves, or some people do barbecue sauce or some other kind of glaze. And I do like to do that, but I do it after the 40 minutes. So I take the aluminum foil and the parchment paper off, I put the ketchup on, and I'll show you with my finished one here in a minute. All right, so this is going into the oven for 40 minutes. So for the ketchup, I'm going to use my TriBest personal blender here. That is on my website store as well. It has these cups, has shorter cups, has the blade there. So we are just going to make a salt and a sugar-free ketchup. And we're just going to start with 3/4 cups water. And then I'm going to put in a half of an apple. I forget what kind of apple this is. Any kind of apple. If you have a sweet apple, it's going to be a little bit sweeter ketchup. If you have a less sweet apple, like a Granny Smith, it's going to be less sweet. So it's kind of your preference. You can peel the apple, you can leave the peeling on. I'm just going to leave it on. And we're going to be blending it up, so the chunks don't have to be real small. Just cut them in half. So put the apple in. So we're going to use this whole can. Again, organic tomato paste, no salt added, from Whole Foods. That's all ketchup is pretty much, is tomato paste. And then usually the store-bought stuff is loaded with refined salt and refined sugar, and then a few little spices. And we're gonna add some apple cider vinegar, just 1 tablespoon. And I am using apple cider vinegar, Bragg's Organic today. So I'm gonna do 2 half tablespoons here. If you didn't have Bragg's or apple cider, you could use a different kind. And then the last thing is a half teaspoon of oregano and a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic, dried garlic. So this is what I'm using instead of just oregano. I like to use these Italian herbs, salt-free. It's a blend of oregano, thyme, and basil. So I'm just going to use that. And then a 1/4 teaspoon of the garlic. Oh, here it is. Of the granulated garlic. And that is it. We're going to put our blade on. And you could also use a Vitamix for this, but I find that it just fits so nicely in my little blender here. All right. If I have left the peeling on, I just like to give it a little extra blend to make sure that those peelings are broken down. That looks really good. And there it is. And as it sits out, it'll get a little darker in color. Right now it's kind of a light orangey color, but as it sits, it will darken into a more red color. That rounding the home stretch here. So here is my completed loaf. But you can see the ketchup on the top, and you can see how the color really changed. It really darkened up a little. And then let's go ahead and cut some of this. Let me get my plate here. Let me cut another piece. And when you serve this to people, you want to give them a nice chunky piece here. Let me get a fork. So there it is. Doesn't that look good? And you don't have to do this top part, but if you're doing it for Thanksgiving, it just kind of looks, it looks nice. And you could make your layer a little thicker than I made mine if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and eat this. Take a little bite for you, because that's the favorite part of the cooking show, right? Mmm. 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 So good. And those nuts in there, they just make it. Something crunchy in there. What was I going to say? Oh, when this comes out of the oven, say on Thanksgiving, let it sit for about 10 minutes or so, so it can kind of solid up. When it comes straight out of the oven, it's very moist, and if you cut right into it, it's just going to fall together. Even if you wait 10 minutes, it might fall. It might still be a little bit delicate, but you want it still to be warm and hot when you're eating it. So just, you know, when you cut it, just be careful. Use a very sharp knife. I think a serrated knife might not be as good because it's going to kind of separate it. Use a very sharp, regular chef's knife to cut that. Thank you.